All right, Matt 2, here we go. We've got lesson 1.1.2, more attributes of polygons. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take those polygons that we were looking at in the last lesson, and we're going to get more specific definitions of their characteristics. So before we get to the actual notes here, let's go ahead and look at this graphic organizer. I've already filled it out so that we're not going to waste a lot of time on this video to do it. But here are some of the ones that we saw the other day, and these are the characteristics of it. Remember, when we're looking at our characteristics, we're looking for, are there any congruent parts? So are there any sides that are the same? Are there any angles that are the same? We're also looking for, are there any 90-degree angles, perpendicular, two sides that come in at a 90-degree angle. We're also looking for parallel. So is there anything on it that's parallel? So going through, first one, we got equilateral triangle. The word equilateral, equa means the same, lateral means sides. So this one is a triangle where all the sides are the same. So this tick mark here shows that all those sides are the same. And then all the other angles are also the same. So all three of these angles end up being the same, which means that since a triangle has 180 degrees, each of those angles have to be 60 degrees. Next one, we've got an isosceles triangle. An isosceles triangle has only two sides the same, whereas an equilateral had all three sides the same. We can see by tick marks here that these two sides are the same, and that means that only two of the angles are the same. So we've got two angle marks down there to show that they are the same. These are called the base angles down here. They always touch one of the congruent sides, but not both the congruent sides. So this top angle is not the base angle. That's actually called the vertex angle, maybe. But anyways, so there we go. Next one, we've got scalene triangle. Scalene triangle has three sides, but none of the sides are congruent. We can see that by these tick marks. We've got one tick mark, two tick mark, three tick mark. So that just means that they're all different on that one. If you haven't already, and maybe you don't have this resource page, at least write down and sketch each of these shapes. Pause if you need to, and write down their characteristics. It'll help you out later on. Next one is we've got a scalene right triangle. So this one, of course, just like the last triangle, has three sides that aren't congruent, so three different sides. But the right part means that it has one right angle. So that's a scalene right. And then we have an isosceles right. So isosceles up here meant that two sides are the same. So this one has two sides that are congruent right there. But it's also a right triangle, so we've got a 90-degree angle down here. And then since these two sides are congruent, these are the base angles, and they're also congruent on this one. So if you got sides that are congruent, you're going to have angles that are congruent in triangles. Next one, I really like going to parallelogram before we get to the next one. So parallelogram has a lot of stuff with it. The main parts of a parallelogram are in the name. Parallelogram just means that opposite sides are parallel. But because those opposite sides are parallel, a whole bunch of other stuff ends up being true about them. The opposite sides are congruent. So you got a tick mark there, a tick mark there. You can see this arrow mark. That's the mark for parallel right there. So I got a one arrow mark here, one arrow mark there, so that those sides are parallel. And I got two arrows there, two arrows there. That means those sides are parallel. So the opposite sides are congruent, opposite sides are congruent. And then the angles that are opposite of each other, they're kind of diagonal from each other there, they're also congruent. So this angle and this angle are the same, and then this angle and this angle are the same. Okay? There you can see that there's other stuff about symmetry on it. We're going to get to that in the notes. Now, there's other shapes that are also parallelograms, but we can get more specific with them. For instance, a square is a parallelogram. It has all the rules of parallelogram, meaning the opposite sides are parallel. But in addition to that, all the sides are the same. So each of the sides are congruent. We can see the one tick mark there. And all the angles are the same. They're all 90-degree angles. Now this means this is a regular shape. So regular shapes, all the angles are the same, and all of the sides are the same. So angles are congruent, sides are congruent. So it is a parallelogram, but it's a parallelogram with some specific parts to it that all the sides are the same and all the angles are the same. Rectangle is a parallelogram, so the opposite sides are parallel, but all of the angles are the same. So the sides aren't the same, but the angles are the same. So it's kind of like a square, except the sides are not all congruent. The opposite sides are congruent, so this one and this one, this one and this one. But we can see here that we have all the angles being 90, but all four sides are not the same. Just the opposite sides are congruent to each other. All right, we got one more page of this. Trapezoid. Trapezoid is where we have only one set of parallel lines, or parallel sides or whatever. So this is a little bit different from our parallelogram because the parallelogram had two sets of parallel sides. A trapezoid has only one set, so we can see those arrows right there for that. So it is a quadrilateral. It has four sides. Okay, a rhombus is a parallelogram. So opposite sides are parallel, and all of the sides are the same, kind of like a square. All the sides were the same in the square. Stupid, really?
Don't forget to stop by either the Columbus North Large Gym or Granite Ridge Gym and take your picture this morning. Thank you.
I'm supposed to take my picture this morning. I'm not going to do it. All right, so where was I? Okay, so all these sides are the same, but unlike a square, all the angles are not 90 degrees. The opposite angles are congruent to each other, but they're not all 90 degrees. So really a square has the characteristics of a rhombus and a rectangle put together. A quadrilateral is just something that has four sides. None of the sides are congruent, no parallel, no 90-degree angles. Kite. A kite is when you have two pairs of congruent adjacent sides. Here's what that means. See how this angle, this side here and this side here, we call those adjacent because they're right next to each other, and those two are the same. And then over here, I've got two other sides that are the same. So kind of like a rhombus, except all four of these are not the same. We got two different sets of sides being the same. Nothing is parallel here, and we do end up having two angles that end up being congruent to each other. So the angles between the one tick mark and two tick mark, one tick mark and two tick mark, so those two angles, they end up being the same. Regular pentagon. Remember, regular means all the sides are the same, all the angles are the same. So here we can see all these sides are the same, and all of these angles have tick marks on them. Regular hexagon. Hexagon. So this one, all the sides are the same, and all the angles are the same. Isosceles trapezoid. So this one, trapezoid, means that we've got sides that are parallel. But in addition to that, isosceles means that these two legs that connect the parallel sides are going to be the same. They're going to be congruent to each other. Now, in addition to this, because those sides are the same, and you'll see this a lot, when sides are the same, you're going to get angles that are the same. Since those sides are the same, this angle up here, these two base angles on top are congruent, and these two base angles on the bottom are congruent to each other. And finally, a right trapezoid. A right trapezoid is when we have a trapezoid, and we have one set of parallel sides. But in addition to that, on one side, so over here in this case, we've got 90-degree angles, making it a right trapezoid. All right, so that is our 16 different shapes. There's more shapes than that, but that's just the 16 that we're going to be focusing on the most. So we got our 16 different shapes. Those are our characteristics that we're going to want to remember. And let's move on. All right, finally getting to the notes. 1-10. So this is straight from your book. Using the Polygon graphic organizer, this thing that we just did, so hopefully you've written down all those characteristics. Complete the following Venn diagram. Condition number 1 is that we're looking for quadrilaterals, one side. Condition number 2, we're looking for them to be equilateral. Equilateral meaning that all the sides are the same. Okay, so sometimes it's easier to find which ones do both. So which one is a quadrilateral and equilateral? Equilateral meaning that all the sides are congruent. So quadrilateral, we're looking for 4 sides, and all the sides are congruent. Hopefully you've thought of square. Square is both. So square we would put in the B. But there's one other shape, hopefully you remember it. It was the rhombus. A rhombus is also 4-sided, and all the sides are congruent to each other, making it equilateral. So square and rhombus, those two, I have to pay attention when I write rhombus, I always misspell it. Those two satisfy both conditions. They are quadrilaterals and they are equilateral. Okay, now we're going to do A. A is only quadrilaterals that are not equilaterals. So let's go through our organizer here. Let's do the first page. Not 4 sides, not 4 sides, not 4 sides, not 4 sides, not 4 sides. We already used this one. This one was both. So we've got rectangle, that's got 4 sides. And we've got parallelogram, that's got 4 sides. So let's add those. So rectangle, parallelogram. Let's do the back page. So trapezoid. We already used this one because this one was both. It was equilateral and 4 sides. So we can add trapezoid. We can add quadrilateral. We can add kite. It's got 4 sides. Nope, nope. And we can add isosceles trapezoid and right trapezoid. So all 3 of the trapezoids, quadrilateral, and rhombus is what we can add to only quadrilateral, not equilateral. So we can do trapezoid, quadrilateral, right trapezoid, isosceles trapezoid, did I get all of them? Would trapezoid, quadrilateral, oh, kite, and kite. All right, now let's look for the equilateral shapes that are not quadrilaterals. Okay, equilateral that are not quadrilaterals. So here we go. First one, equilateral triangle. It's not a quadrilateral, but it is equilateral. So let's add that one. Nope, 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 nope. All right, so that's the only one on that page. On this one, no, we already used this one. Nope, nope, nope. These two. So regular shapes are equilateral. So they have all the sides being the same. And these are not quadrilaterals, so we can add these. So we got a regular pentagon, regular hexagon. And then finally, we're going to find the shapes that don't fit into either one. They're not quadrilaterals and they're not equilateral. So there's a couple of these. We've got isosceles triangles. We've got scalene triangle. I'm just going to do triangle. We've got a scalene right triangle. I'll just call it a right triangle. And what else do we got? Oh, isosceles right triangle. All right, there we go. Next one. How can we describe a square? And describe it in a way that it cannot be confused with any other shape. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to say about a square is that it's a parallelogram. Okay, so a square is a parallelogram. It has all of the characteristics of a parallelogram, but parallelogram describes several shapes. So if I just said a square is a parallelogram, that means that it could be a square, it could be a parallelogram, it could be a rectangle, and on the other page it could have been a rhombus too. So I need to be more specific. So maybe I would also say all the sides are congruent. But there's another shape that is a parallelogram with all sides congruent. That's a rhombus. So I need a little bit more. And so to add to it, I'd say also that all the angles are congruent, or all the angles are 90 degrees or right, or however you want to say it. So all the angles are congruent. With those three definitions or characteristics, no other shape has that. So if I would say I've got a parallelogram with all the sides congruent and all the angles congruent, there's only one thing it can be. That's a good definition because it's not confusing. You can't confuse it with another shape. So a parallelogram with all sides congruent and all angles congruent is definitely going to be a square. On the polygon graphic organizer, notice the definitions of a rectangle. Okay, they gave it to us here. It's a quadrilateral with 4 right angles. Okay. The special qualities includes things like parallel sides, congruent sides, right angles, congruent angles and symmetry. In groups of 4, describe the attributes of the shape that the teacher assigns you. So at this point, I would have had you look through all these different shapes and do the attributes for the shapes. We're going to skip that for right now because we already did it at the very beginning. Let's see, 1-13. In teams, complete the rest of the polygon organizer, which we already did. So this just talks about how we're going to mark the shape, which we already did. Awesome. Moving on. All right, we're to the bottom of our page. We're almost done here. The following Venn diagram doesn't have the attributes or the conditions labeled. What could those be? Well, over here, this is only looks like triangles, and then inside of here, this is also triangles. So inside this big circle, it looks like we're just looking at triangles. Okay, so I'm going to call condition 1 triangles. Condition 2, I've got a whole bunch of shapes. I've got a rectangle, I've got a kite, I've got a parallelogram, I've got a regular pentagon. Looks like here I've got an isosceles right triangle, and over here I have just an isosceles triangle. So these are kind of shapes that have not a lot in common, but they do have one thing in common. All of these shapes have congruent sides on them. Notice that over here, this was a scalene right triangle, and this triangle here is a scalene triangle. None of these sides are the same, but all of these shapes have at least 2 sides that are the same. Because like on a rectangle, this side and this side are the same, and this side and this side are the same. On a kite, this side and this side are the same, this side and this side are the same. On a parallelogram, we've got congruent sides. This is regular, so all these sides are the same. And then this is isosceles there, and this is isosceles there. So it looks like all of these, what they have in common is they have at least 2 congruent sides. And that being the symbol for congruent. All right, Elizabeth started the Venn diagram shown below. The only shape that fits the 2 overlapping circles is a square. What could her 2 attributes be? All right, so this could be several things. Okay, so the only thing that is for both is a square. So maybe we would say that this side is quadrilaterals. Around our room. So all the other quadrilaterals would maybe show up in this part. So how is a square different from all the other quadrilaterals? What else does it have? Well, we do know that a square is the only quadrilateral that is regular, meaning that all the sides are congruent and all the angles are congruent. So maybe in this part of it, we'd have an equilateral triangle, we'd have a regular pentagon, and a regular hexagon over here. And so the square would be the only thing that is a quadrilateral and regular at the same time. You could also, let's see, a different way to do it, or what else could we do here? Oh, I know. We could say all the sides are congruent. Okay, so this one would have all sides congruent, so that'd be pretty much the regular shapes, right? But then over here we could have that it has 4 right angles. So there's only one shape where all the sides are congruent, and it has 4 right angles, and that would be the square. So 4 right angles over here, we might also put a rectangle in this side, but a rectangle, all the sides are not congruent. So over here on all sides not congruent, we'd probably put equilateral triangle, regular pentagon, regular hexagon. All right, that's all I got for you. Math hard. Bye-bye.